news next on AM 560, The Answer.
This hourly segment is brought to you by the Money Hour Radio Show, Saturday afternoons at 3 on AM 560, The Answer. Brought to you by Pearshell Financial Group.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy, and unlike the left and their handmaidens in the D.C. press corps and big urban centers like Chicago press corps, sort of the minor leagues of the D.C. press corps, we don't paper over idiotic, intemperate statements from those who purport to be conservatives because it dilutes the brand, so you have to address them.
And yesterday, Congressman Stephen King from Iowa stepped in it when he made a comment.
He's had his share of controversies. This speaking to a conservative club in his district. He said this about being pro-life.
But we still stand on these principles alive. And since then, I started to think, we know the reasons why we don't accept exceptions for the most of us for rape and incest, because it's not the baby's fault. But there's another thing. I started to wonder about this. What if it was okay, and what if we went back through all the family trees and just pulled those people out that were products of rape and incest? Would there be any population of the world left if we did that? Considering all the wars and all the rape and pillage that's taken place and whatever happened in culture after society, I know I can't certify that they're not part of a product of that. And I'd like to think every one of the lives of us are as precious as any other life. And that's our measure. Human life cannot be measured. It is the measure itself against which all things are weighed.
Yeah, okay about human life. The whole idea of rape and incest, would any of us be here?
Would there be a population?
Yeah, would there be a population? Would we be here but for rape and incest throughout the annals of history? That is a wildly idiotic statement.
Well, Liz Cheney called on him to resign. She tweeted, today's comments by Rep. Stephen King, Iowa, are appalling and bizarre. As I've said before, it's time for him to go. The people of Iowa's 4th Congressional District deserve better.
They're also politically tone deaf. I mean, rape and incest exceptions, and we can debate them, and that's what the left wants you to do. That's what the pro-aborts want you to do. They represent less than 2% of abortions that have been committed since Roe v. Wade. So I'll tell you what, let's deal with, I'm pro-life without exception. Life of the mother, not an exception. It's a Hippocratic Oath decision. But let's get to where we only have rape and incest left to argue. How about taking that approach, that strategic approach? He's been a member of Congress. He's been in politics long enough to know.
But he's not on any committee now because of what he said in January when he talked, questioned why the terms white supremacist and white nationalist had become offensive.
Yes. But on the life issue, particularly since King runs on that from a conservative district, you should have a thoughtful, strategically intelligent conservative leader. And I'm sorry to say that Steve King doesn't meet that description, certainly not anymore, even though he's since said, white nationalism is an odious ideology. He's just not precise with his words, and his ruminating about rape and incest and the annals of it. It's just so bizarre. Kevin McCarthy was on with our friend Brett Barron's special report yesterday. He was asked about it, said this.
This isn't the first time I've had concerns with what Steve King has said. Earlier in this Congress, there are things that Steve King said that I do not believe the party of Lincoln would stand for. And as a united conference, we actually removed Steve King from his committees inside Congress. And I think this just continues to show why that action was taken.
Well, and
they've given him construction paper and crayons and stay in your office.
The voters are going to have a choice whether or not to remove him in a primary come this cycle. For more on the topic, this topic and many others related to 2020, we're pleased to be joined again by Jazz Shaw, who has the best name in
the world,
in media, certainly in media. I don't know if the best name in the world.
Well, what do you think the best name in the world? Besides Dan Proft.
No,
really.
No, that's boring. No, probably
house guest.
DeBrickashaw Ferguson.
DeBrickashaw Ferguson.
Yeah, he was a lineman for the Steelers.
That's digging deep.
And the Jets too, I think. Yeah.
I know someone named House Guest. His last name was Guest, so he legally changed his name first name to House.
I'll have to think of other cool names, but DeBrickashaw. We've talked about this before. I like an apostrophe in the first name.
Okay.
I've always wanted one. Maybe someday. Jazz Shaw, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Pleasure to be here. And now you've got me wondering if I should add an apostrophe to my first name.
No, I don't think so. I don't think it
Shaw.
needs it. I don't think
Yeah.
it needs it. Mine does. I don't think yours. Jazz is pretty hep. That's pretty hep. What about Steve King and sort of it just speaks to the larger issue of internal policing, right? Internal quality control in the Republican Party, and I think you get credit when you exercise some internal quality control.
Well, I think there's internal quality control going on right now.
Yeah.
This is yet another example of Steve King saying something, and be prepared for people to start to get offended for a second here, saying something which technically there is some truth to what he's saying historically, but you can't be dumb enough as a politician to stand up there and say that. That's just, it's not good judgment. I mean, obviously, yes, history is full of incidents of rape, particularly during war. I saw a statistic once that like 1 out of every 15 people in the world is a descendant of Genghis Khan in some way, So that was going on, but no, you don't say that.
Right.
Right. And I mean, again, he's lost all his committee assignments, and he does have a challenger, Iowa State Senator Randy Fenstra, and he's raised $260,000 in the first quarter. That's 4 times what King's campaign raised. And even that's not enough to, like some people just don't get it, right? That you need to step down and need to not run again.
Well, I trust me, I will be shocked. I will faint if Steve King actually stepped aside. The question is, how much will the people of Iowa's 4th District put up with?
Right.
And is there a point where there's a bridge too far and they go, okay, you've had your day in the sun, but we really need to try something else?
Yeah. Leveling up to presidential politics and the Democrats, socialists. You got Bobby O'Rourke restarting his campaign.
Again.
I think he's flooding the engine at this point.
Yeah.
And you've got Hickenlooper dropping out. But, I mean, you basically have sort of these 5 or 6 candidates that are going to be the focus coming into the next debate, where it'll be 5 by 5 rather than 10 by 10. So you start to see, you start to have sort of performance standards raised and perhaps more memorable moments. Who do you see right now with momentum within the Democrat ranks? Is it Elizabeth Warren?
You mean in terms of catching up to Joe Biden?
Yes, exactly.
I don't know that we're going to be lucky enough to draw Warren as the Democratic candidate, because I think she's a terrible candidate. But yeah, she's shown the most movement recently. Bernie Sanders has been losing some support, and I'd have to double check. Did I just see a headline saying that Warren had actually tied or pulled ahead of Biden in New
It's
Hampshire?
close, 21-20.
Yeah, statistical, margin of error, right?
Yeah, so I'd say she's the one with the hot hand for the moment. For the life of me, I can't imagine why. But if that's what the Democrats are looking for, God bless them. Bless their hearts.
And Hickenlooper is leaving the race to spend more time watching adult films with his mom, possibly, correct?
I saw that tweet this morning. Yeah, I think Hickenlooper is the big news, because the other candidates will all be waiting to see who gets his 5 supporters. Because that might give them a bump in the polls of 0.1% or something. I don't know why he was ever in the race. But yeah, good call on his part. Has he announced, I don't think he has, whether or not he's going to switch over and try to make a Senate bid?
Yeah, that's sort of
That's
the
probably why he's
supposition,
gonna have
but
a press conference today.
yeah, he hasn't announced that yet. We'll see. I wanted to get your take on violence, obviously, but in the wake of El Paso and Dayton, now this Philadelphia police standoff yesterday. One story of violence that's been significantly underreported, I would say, and understandably no injuries, thankfully, so it's not as serious as some of these other matters. But the attacks on ICE facilities. You had 2 shootings at 2 ICE facilities in the San Antonio area the other day. This on the cusp of attacks over just the last 30 days in Washington, D.C., in Tacoma, Washington, in Aurora, Colorado. And, why Republicans aren't doing a better job to sort of force those attacks, those acts of violence into the larger conversation about rhetoric, civility, policy making, violence prevention generally?
I think Republicans are making the effort, but that effort is largely muted because this is a subject that the mainstream media does not want to talk about. Yesterday morning, I tweeted something about this. The latest shooting in San Antonio took place, overnight on the previous night, and by 9 or 10 o'clock yesterday morning, I went and looked on the front page of CNN, scrolled down the entire thing. There was not a word about it. I heard it mentioned once on the air on CNN, like in the 6 o'clock hour, for a minute and a half, and there was no roundtable panel discussion following it, nothing, and I didn't see it brought up again the rest of the day. So there is a news blackout on that item. It's apparently a local news story. So I don't know how much more it's being talked about in conservative media, but you're not going to reach the wider audience of undecided people and people who don't, follow political outlets, conservative outlets on a regular basis. They're not even aware this happened.
Well, right, and you're certainly not going to reach it if you do a Google search, as we continue to learn. The whistleblower that went to Project Veritas and James O'Keefe unmasking himself for another sit-down, and a renewed discussion about the algorithmic fairness employed by Google to manipulate search results, as well as the blacklisting of mostly conservative sites, at least per the example that this senior software engineer provided O'Keefe. And it seems to me, in the wake of the testimony from Dennis Prager and Dr. Robert Epstein and these whistleblowers who've come forward to talk about what big tech does and what they're aiming to do with respect to 2020, this is also something that should be more of a discussion point for Republicans and not just the province of the Department of Justice, Antitrust Division, or the FTC.
Google is a problem, but is there a legitimate constitutional solution to it? It's a private company. It's not the government. So that's what I keep wrestling with.
Well, but I
they
mean,
have so much
yell at
influence.
them.
I mean, they could affect 15 million voters.
But even short of a legislative or law enforcement action, raising the issue, so people people who have bully pulpits to raise the issue, so that you don't have to rely on Google searches to return the information.
Oh, absolutely. I'm just saying, if we start talking about government investigations into it, well, you can investigate, but what's the government going to do about it? Because, not to put it too bluntly, but the free market solution is, well, if you don't like the way Google is censoring everybody and being so one-sided, you use another search engine, and enough people vote with their feet. But is that really true? Google owns so much of the market that you almost can't get by without Google, or it becomes a lot more difficult. So they do have something of a monopoly, but I don't even know if it qualifies as monopoly. The issue needs to be raised. People need to be educated about it. Perhaps Google can be shamed into doing the right thing. But then again, so much of what they do, unless you have people like this whistleblower, is done under the covers. They don't release all their code. They don't let people inspect it, and they're not required to, if they're not breaking any laws. But they've been doing all this stuff in secret and basically denying it. Twitter's done the same thing. They denied that there was, I forget the word, basically muting of
shadow
conservatives,
banning.
so they wouldn't.
Yeah.
Shadow banning, thank you. They denied that for the longest time until they made an announcement where they said that's exactly what they've been doing, but they just don't like using that word. So, but nobody knew about it because you can't go in and examine Twitter's code.
He is Jazz Shaw. He's considering adding an apostrophe to his first name. I don't think it's needed. He's the weekend editor at hotair.com. Jazz, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Always a pleasure. Thank you very much.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's like